The massive alien warship loomed over New York City, its shadow casting an eerie twilight across the bustling metropolis below. Lieutenant Sarah Chen stood at attention in the UN Security Council chamber, her hands clasped tightly behind her back as she delivered the news that would change humanity's place in the cosmos forever. Distinguished members of the Council, 3 hours ago we received an ultimatum from the Galactic Imperial Fleet. They demand Earth's immediate integration into their empire, claiming it's for our own protection and advancement. She paused, letting the gravity of her words sink in. The chamber erupted in whispers and hushed conversations. Sarah glanced at the holographic projection showing the Imperial flagship, a behemoth of dark metal and pulsing energy fields that dwarfed anything humanity had ever built. But unlike the fearful murmurs around her, she felt a familiar fire burning in her chest, the same fire that had driven her ancestors to stand against overwhelming odds throughout human history. The Empire's ambassador stated that resistance would be, she checked her tablet, regrettably met with appropriate corrective measures. In other words, they're threatening to forcibly subjugate Earth if we don't willingly submit. Council President Richardson leaned forward, his weathered face illuminated by the soft blue glow of the hologram. And what exactly do our analysts say about their military capabilities, Lieutenant? Sir, their technology is approximately 3 centuries ahead of ours. Their weapon systems alone could. Sarah's voice trailed off as the chamber's smart glass windows automatically darkened, responding to a brilliant flash from outside. The Imperial ships were putting on a show of force, painting the sky with antimatter explosions that rivaled the sun. But Sarah wasn't finished. She straightened her back and continued with steel in her voice. However, our analysis also shows something they don't expect, something that makes Earth unique among all the worlds they've conquered so far. The chamber fell silent as Sarah walked to the central podium and activated a new hologram, this one showing Earth's complete orbital defense grid. Thousands of satellites, stations, and automated platforms created a glittering web around the planet. We may not match their technology, but we've spent the last 50 years preparing for exactly this scenario. Project Guardian is ready. President Richardson's eyes widened as he understood the implications. You're suggesting we actually refuse their demand. Lieutenant, that's exactly what I'm suggesting, sir. Sarah's voice carried across the chamber with unwavering conviction. Humanity has never bowed to tyranny before. We didn't during our darkest hours on Earth. And I say we don't start now that the threat comes from the stars. The chamber erupted in chaos as delegates argued frantically. But Sarah noticed something else. A gleam of pride in many eyes, a straightening of shoulders, a lifting of chins. She continued, her voice rising above the commotion. The Empire expects us to be like every other world they've encountered, eager to trade our freedom for their protection and technology. But they don't understand what makes us different. They don't understand that humanity. Suddenly, every screen in the chamber lit up with an incoming transmission. The Imperial Ambassador's alien features filled the displays, his metallic scales gleaming as he spoke in perfectly translated English. Honored representatives of Earth, your deliberation time has expired. What is your answer? Sarah looked at President Richardson, who stood slowly and straightened his tie. In that moment, she saw 5,000 years of human history in his eyes, every battle fought for freedom, every triumph against impossible odds, every moment when humanity had faced extinction and emerged stronger. He stepped to the podium, and Sarah felt a chill run down her spine as he began to speak. The next words out of his mouth would either mark humanity's submission to alien rule or spark the greatest conflict Earth had ever faced. And based on the determined set of his jaw, Sarah had a pretty good idea which it would be. Mr. Ambassador, he said, his voice unwavering, on behalf of Earth, I have a message for your empire. President Richardson's next words echoed through the chamber with quiet determination. Earth is closed to your empire. We respectfully decline your offer of protection and integration. The ambassador's metallic scales rippled in what Sarah recognized as their species' expression of surprise. Clearly, no one had ever refused them before. Perhaps, the ambassador's translated voice carried an edge of condescension. You don't fully understand the implications of your decision. The Empire's protection is not merely an offer. It is an inevitability. In the last millennium, over 3,000 civilizations have joined our collective. Sarah watched as Richardson's expression hardened. We understand perfectly, Ambassador. What you don't understand is that humanity has never responded well to ultimatums. For as long as we've existed, we fought against those who would strip away our freedom, no matter the odds. The holographic display suddenly split to show multiple angles of the Imperial fleet repositioning. Sarah's tactical training kicked in as she analyzed their movement patterns. They were shifting into standard orbital bombardment formation. But something was off about their positioning, something that tickled the back of her mind. Fascinating, the ambassador mused. Your species' dedication to its primitive concept of independence is noteworthy. But surely you must realize that resistance is. If you say futile, Ambassador, Sarah stepped forward, unable to contain herself. I suggest you review your historical data more carefully. Humanity has faced extinction-level events before. We've survived ice ages, plagues, world wars, and our own near destruction of Earth's climate. Each time, we've emerged stronger. President Richardson gave her a slight nod of approval before turning back to the ambassador. What my lieutenant is saying, albeit more directly than diplomatic protocol might suggest, is that humanity has a unique characteristic your empire seems to have overlooked. We don't surrender our sovereignty, not to kings, not to dictators, and certainly not to alien empires, no matter how advanced they may be. The ambassador's scales now shifted to a deeper hue, a sign of growing agitation. You speak of survival, yet you haven't faced the full might of a galactic civilization. Our smallest warship carries enough firepower to level your largest cities. The Empire's patience is not unlimited. Sarah's mind finally caught what had been bothering her about the fleet's formation. They were positioned perfectly to avoid Earth's major population centers while still maintaining optimal firing solutions. These weren't the actions of an empire preparing for war. They were the careful maneuvers of someone trying to avoid unnecessary casualties. The realization hit her like a thunderbolt. The Empire wasn't as confident as they appeared. They were used to species that would do anything to avoid conflict, but humanity's refusal had thrown them off balance. Their careful positioning wasn't just tactical, it was hesitant. President Richardson must have sensed it too. Ambassador, before you make your next decision, I suggest you consider something. Every civilization you've encountered so far has submitted to your rule because they feared the alternative. But humanity. He allowed himself a small smile. We've lived with the fear of annihilation for most of our history. We've written stories about it, made movies about it, prepared for it. In a way, you might say we've been expecting you. The ambassador's image flickered as he received information from his fleet. His scales rippled rapidly. Surprise again, but this time mixed with something else. Was it concern? Our sensors are detecting energy signatures throughout your orbital defense grid. Quite impressive for your technology level, but surely you don't intend to. What we intend, Sarah interrupted, her tactical display showing Project Guardian's systems coming fully online, is to show you exactly why Earth is different from every other world you've encountered, and why attempting to force our compliance would be the biggest mistake your empire has made in its 1,000-year history. The ambassador's eyes narrowed as new data streamed across his displays. This is unexpected. The ambassador's hologram vanished abruptly, leaving the chamber in tense silence. Sarah's tactical display erupted with new data as the Imperial fleet began powering up their weapons systems. The massive ship's energy signatures blazed like miniature suns in orbit, their hull plating shifting and realigning into combat configurations. Sir, Sarah addressed President Richardson while scanning the incoming data. They're charging weapons, but they're still maintaining their careful distance from population centers. Their formation suggests they're planning a demonstration strike rather than a full assault. She paused, allowing a small smile to cross her face. They're still trying to intimidate us into submission. Richardson nodded thoughtfully, his eyes fixed on the main display showing the fleet's movements. They've never had to actually fight a war of conquest, have they? Every other species just gave in. He turned to address the Security Council. Ladies and gentlemen, I believe we're about to show them why that was a mistake. The chamber's smart glass windows suddenly darkened again, but this time it wasn't from weapons fire. Massive shadows began passing overhead as the Imperial fleet repositioned, their enormous ships moving with impossible grace for their size. The sight was meant to terrify, to remind Earth of its technological inferiority. Instead, Sarah noticed the council members watching with grim determination. Project Guardian status. Richardson's voice was steady, calculated. Sarah's fingers flew across her tactical display. All systems green, sir. The Empire still hasn't detected the true nature of our orbital grid. They think they're just facing basic defense satellites. She highlighted a particular section of data. Their scans can't penetrate the quantum shielding we reversed engineered from the crashed scout ship 30 years ago. The memory of that crashed ship had shaped humanity's preparation for this moment. While the rest of the galaxy had submitted to the Empire's protection, Earth had spent decades secretly preparing, learning, adapting. Every satellite launched, every space station built, had been part of a greater plan, one that the Empire was about to discover. Suddenly, the ambassador's image reappeared, his scales now a deep crimson. Your satellites are activating defensive measures. This is most irregular. No protected world has ever. He paused, his alien features showing what Sarah interpreted as genuine confusion. Our records indicate your technology level should not be capable of these energy readings. Perhaps, Richardson replied calmly, your records need updating. Humanity has a long history of exceeding expectations, especially when our freedom is at stake. The ambassador's response was cut short by urgent chattering in his native language from off-screen. His scales paled to an almost white color, a sign of extreme agitation or fear. Impossible. Our deep scans are detecting. But the quantum signatures. This cannot be. Sarah watched as recognition dawned in the ambassador's eyes. The Empire was finally realizing that Earth's orbital defense grid wasn't just a collection of primitive satellites. Each component was part of something larger, something that humanity had spent half a century building in plain sight. Last chance. Ambassador, Richardson's voice carried an edge of steel. Withdraw your fleet and recognize Earth's sovereign right to remain independent. Or don't, and discover firsthand why no power, terrestrial or celestial, has ever successfully conquered humanity. The chamber's displays lit up with warning signals as the Imperial fleet began charging their main weapons. The ambassador's image flickered as he received real-time updates, his scales shifting through various colors of distress. You cannot possibly think, even with these unexpected developments, you must understand the Empire's technological superiority. What we understand, Sarah interrupted, her finger hovering over Project Guardian's activation sequence, is that superior technology doesn't always guarantee victory. Sometimes, the decisive factor is simply wanting it more. She looked at President Richardson, awaiting his command. And believe me, Ambassador, humanity wants its freedom more than your empire wants another conquest. The next few moments would determine the fate of Earth. As Sarah watched the Imperial ships positioning themselves for what they thought would be a simple show of force, she couldn't help but think about how they had completely misread humanity. They expected submission, but they were about to learn why Earth's history books were filled with tales of smaller, seemingly weaker forces overcoming overwhelming odds. President Richardson stood straight, his voice unwavering, as he gave the order that would change the course of galactic history. Lieutenant Chen, initiate Project Guardian. Sarah's fingers moved across the activation console with practiced precision. The orbital grid hummed to life, quantum signals rippling through the carefully positioned network of satellites. But just as she was about to complete the final sequence, her display erupted with urgent warnings. Warning signs she'd never seen in any simulation. Sir, her voice tight with concern, we're detecting massive energy surges from within the Imperial fleet. But they're not weapons signatures. She frantically analyzed the incoming data. These are transportation signatures, hundreds of them, thousands. The chamber's main display shifted to show new vessels emerging from hyperspace, but these weren't Imperial warships. These ships were different, their designs more organic, more fluid. They moved with an almost predatory grace as they positioned themselves between Earth and the Imperial fleet. The ambassador's hologram flickered wildly, his scales cycling through colors so rapidly they became a blur. The resistance, he hissed, genuine fear evident in his translated voice. How did they know? This is impossible. President Richardson stepped forward, a knowing smile playing at the corners of his mouth. Did you really think Earth was the first civilization to refuse your protection, Ambassador? We've been in contact with the Galactic Resistance for years. That scout ship that crashed 30 years ago. It wasn't Imperial. It was one of theirs. Sarah watched in awe as more resistance ships arrived, their formations creating an intricate dance of light and shadow above Earth. Each vessel was unique, representing different species, different worlds that had secretly opposed the Empire's forced protection for centuries. You see, Ambassador, Richardson continued, while your empire was busy collecting submissive worlds, you never noticed the network of resistance growing right under your nose. Earth isn't just refusing to join your empire. We're declaring ourselves the first open ally of the Free Galactic Alliance. The ambassador's image stabilized, his scales settling into a deep blue of calculation. This changes nothing. Even with these rebels, you cannot hope to. His words cut off as Sarah completed Project Guardian's activation sequence. The orbital grid transformed. What had appeared to be simple satellites began unfolding, revealing crystalline structures that had been hidden in plain sight. They linked together, forming geometric patterns that hummed with quantum energy. Earth's atmosphere itself seemed to shimmer as ancient theorems of physics were rewritten in real time. By the eternal stars, the ambassador whispered, his translator barely catching the words, the legends of the first species, their defense network, you've recreated it. Sarah couldn't help but smile at the ambassador's shock. Not recreated, Ambassador, improved upon. Turns out humans are pretty good at taking existing technology and finding new ways to use it. Those quantum signatures you detected, they weren't just defensive measures. They were a beacon. The resistance ships moved into perfect synchronization with Earth's defense grid, their own systems harmonizing with the quantum network. What had seemed like an impossibly outmatched planet was now the center of the largest anti-imperial force ever assembled. President Richardson's voice carried the weight of history as he addressed not just the ambassador, but the entire imperial fleet. We're not just refusing your protection, Ambassador. Earth is now officially a sanctuary world for any civilization seeking freedom from the Empire. You can either accept this new reality, or... He never finished the sentence. The Imperial fleet's formation suddenly shifted, their weapons powering down, but not voluntarily. Sarah's displays showed the quantum network had already begun its work, systematically isolating and neutralizing Imperial technology. But just as victory seemed within reach, her tactical display flashed red. Sir, the urgency in her voice cut through the chamber's tension. We're detecting a new energy signature. Something massive. Something ancient. The ambassador's scales had turned pure white, a color Sarah had never seen before. You don't understand what you've done, he whispered. The Empire's protection wasn't just about conquest. It was about containment. And now they know we're vulnerable. As if in response to his words, the space above Earth began to distort, reality itself seeming to bend as something began to emerge from the depths of space-time. Something that made both Imperial and Resistance ships look like toys in comparison. The true reason for the Empire's expansion was about to reveal itself, and Earth was now at the center of a conflict far older and more terrifying than anyone had imagined. The massive entity emerging from the space-time distortion defied description. It appeared as a living constellation, a being of pure energy and ancient purpose. Both Imperial and Resistance ships hung motionless in its presence, their crews likely as awestruck as the humans watching from Earth below. The architects, the ambassador's voice trembled. We thought we had more time. The Empire's expansion was meant to prepare galaxies for their return. His scales had turned an impossible shade of silver. They are the ones who seeded the stars with life, who built the quantum networks your species has reactivated. And now, Sarah's tactical displays were going haywire, struggling to process the readings from the entity. But something caught her attention, a pattern in the quantum frequencies, oddly familiar. Her eyes widened as she recognized it. "Sir," she called to Richardson, her voice steady despite her racing heart, "the quantum network. It's not just recognizing the entity's presence. It's communicating with it." President Richardson stepped forward, his expression a mix of awe and determination. "Ambassador, you said the Empire was preparing galaxies for their return. But did you ever stop to ask why? Did you ever try to actually communicate with the network you found?" The ancient entity pulsed with light, and suddenly every screen in the chamber filled with symbols, mathematics in its purest form, the universal language. Sarah's hands flew across her console as she integrated the quantum network's translations. It's a test," she breathed, understanding dawning. The quantum networks, the technology left behind. They weren't meant to be hoarded or controlled. They were meant to bring species together, to teach cooperation instead of conquest. The ambassador's scales shifted rapidly as he processed this revelation. Impossible. The Empire's greatest minds spent centuries studying the ancient networks. But they studied them as weapons. Richardson interrupted, as tools for control. Humanity looked at them and saw something different. A bridge between civilizations. That's why Earth's network responded differently. We didn't try to master it. We tried to understand it. The architect's presence seemed to intensify, its energy patterns shifting. Through the quantum network, its intention became clear. The Empire's approach had been wrong from the start. Its forced protection and isolation of worlds had prevented the very cooperation the architects had hoped to foster. Sarah watched in amazement as the quantum network began to pulse in harmony with the ancient entity. The geometric patterns above Earth expanded, connecting not just the resistance ships, but the Imperial fleet as well. It wasn't a weapon. It was an invitation. "The network," she explained, her voice filled with wonder. "It's not just a defense system. It's a key to unlocking cooperative technologies we can't even imagine. But it only works if species choose to work together freely." President Richardson turned to the ambassador, whose scales had finally settled into a deep purple of revelation. "So, ambassador, the choice is yours. The Empire can continue its path of forced protection, fighting against the very purpose of the technology you discovered. Or, Sarah finished, you can join Earth and the Resistance in building something new. Something that actually honors the legacy of the architects." The architect's form pulsed one final time, and every piece of technology in orbit, Imperial, Resistance, and Earth's network, harmonized perfectly for a brief moment. The message was clear. This was the true test, not of military might or technological superiority, but of wisdom and cooperation. The ambassador was silent for a long moment before his scales shifted to a completely new color, one that Sarah suspected even he had never displayed before. "Perhaps," he said slowly, "it is time for the Empire to learn a lesson from Earth, not in warfare, but in understanding." As the architect began to fade, returning to whatever dimension it called home, it left behind one final gift. The quantum network flared to life with new knowledge, not weapons or defense systems, but blueprints for technologies that would only function through genuine cooperation between species. "Well," Richardson smiled, looking at the amazed faces around him, "it seems Earth isn't just banning the Galactic Empire. We're helping to transform it." He turned to Sarah. "Lieutenant, please prepare a message to all Earth's nations. I believe we have some interesting diplomatic work ahead of us." The chamber erupted in excited discussion as the implications became clear. Earth hadn't just avoided conquest. It had helped unlock the next chapter in galactic civilization. And as Sarah looked at her displays showing ships from former enemies now linked in cooperative harmony, she couldn't help but smile at the irony. In trying to ban the Empire from Earth, they had instead found a way to unite the galaxy, not through force or protection, but through the very human qualities of curiosity, cooperation, and the willingness to see things differently. 1 month after the architect's appearance, Sarah stood at the same podium in the UN Security Council chamber, but the atmosphere couldn't have been more different. Representatives from Earth, the former Empire, and the Resistance sat together, their differences set aside in pursuit of something greater. The integration of the quantum network technologies has exceeded our initial projections, she reported, gesturing to the holographic display showing the transformed orbital grid. Already, we're seeing unprecedented advances in clean energy, medical technology, and space travel. But more importantly, these advances only work when we collaborate. The former ambassador, now serving as the liaison for the newly formed Galactic Cooperative, nodded in agreement. His scales shimmered with a peaceful blue tone that would have been unimaginable just weeks ago. The Empire spent centuries trying to force cooperation through protection and control. We never considered that genuine partnership would yield far greater results. Sarah couldn't help but smile as she watched Imperial and Resistance engineers working side by side with human scientists in the orbital stations. The quantum network had become a symbol of their shared potential, growing stronger with each new act of cooperation. The architects, President Richardson added, didn't leave us weapons or defenses. They left us a blueprint for growing together. Earth's stubbornness in maintaining independence ironically led to the greatest partnership the galaxy has ever seen. The chamber's displays showed live feeds from across the planet, where the benefits of this cooperation were already visible. Hospitals using hybrid human-alien medical techniques to cure previously untreatable diseases. Schools where children learned alongside holographic alien students, sharing knowledge and culture. Former Imperial warships now converted into exploration vessels, preparing for joint missions to uncharted regions of space. But perhaps the most remarkable change, Sarah continued, pulling up a new set of data, is the response from other worlds. Since Earth's stand against the Empire and the revelation of the architect's true purpose, 17 previously neutral systems have joined the cooperative. They're not joining out of fear or a need for protection, but out of genuine desire to be part of something greater. The former ambassador's scales rippled with amusement. To think, we spent a millennium building an empire through force, only to achieve true unity by letting it go. There's a human phrase for this, is there not? The more you try to hold on to something, the more it slips through your fingers. Richardson finished with a smile. Though in this case, I'd say we all ended up holding something far more valuable. As the meeting concluded, Sarah took a moment to look out the window at the New York skyline. Imperial ships still hung in orbit, but now they were there as partners, not conquerors. The quantum network shimmered faintly in the evening sky, a constant reminder that the greatest power in the universe wasn't force or advanced technology, but the simple willingness to work together. Lieutenant Chen, Richardson called as the chamber emptied. The cooperative's first deep space expedition leaves next week. They've requested you as Earth's representative. Sarah felt a surge of excitement. The same determination that had made her stand against the Empire now pushed her to explore the possibilities of their new partnership. Hard to believe, sir. A month ago, we were preparing to fight off an alien empire. And now we're helping to guide the galaxy towards something better. Richardson smiled. Though I suspect that's what the architects intended all along. Sometimes the best way to ban an empire is to transform it into something else entirely. As Sarah looked at her mission briefing, showing the unprecedented joint expedition of former enemies now working as one, she realized that Earth hadn't just banned an empire. It had helped birth a new era of galactic cooperation, and this was just the beginning.